So, this exhibit is about a family story, and the story is the Simmons family and what happened to us and how we ended up in, how would you guess, perhaps not Chicago or Detroit or New York, but Davenport, Iowa. Davenport, Iowa. And the narrative that I've written talks about what happened to us. For a long time, I didn't realize that we were part of something much bigger. You know, this was a part of this big migration that took place over the course, starting around 1915. And for a period of time, about 1.5 million people, right after the war and during the First World War, began to leave the South. Started up again sometime after that, around World War II, and another 4.5 million people left the South, coming north and then west to get away from a place that was just not, it wasn't a good place to be. It wasn't hospitable at all. And it was one where persons were really trying to survive. You know, black folk could not get work as a rule, and the only thing that you really had going was sharecropping. Well, out of all of that, something happened where my father got into an altercation where he worked, and the shop boss was dressing him down in front of the men, and Dad didn't suffer fools, and he didn't take a lot of stuff. And the shop boss said, I ought to take a pipe and bust you upside the head with it. He didn't realize that Pop already had a pipe, and he told him I already got one. And he ran him out of the shop. That was a start, and that was a critical thing that led us to have to leave the South. Following that, and in the narratives, there are some things that talk about different parts where we had to do some different things to nuance getting away. But I'd like you to really take time, if you have it, to just kind of review it, look at it. It is my family story, but it's not terribly unique, and only unique in that it's mine. And when I first started talking about this with my older brothers, who are 3 above me, it was one where the younger generations in the family did not know the story. There's a 25-year span from the oldest to the youngest. And so I started doing carvings originally and talking about the family and talking about the story. And from the carvings, I began to write more and more. And it gravitated into then painting pictures to identify the narrative. And it just grew. But it was one where I wanted to make sure that this important story was not lost. And my parents died at 51 and 52 years old in the early 70s. And I wanted for this story to be a part of what our family carried forward in the next generation. So it was really connecting the past, the present, and future generations, well, what our story was. And I recognize that all of us have stories, you know, that are shared or not shared. But if you're not sharing these stories, I think it's really important that you share these stories and not let them slip. Not let them slip lost into time. So
when your family left the South, I mean, exactly what happened?
It was not difficult for me, because I didn't know what was going on. I was only 1 year old. Now, my older brothers, it was very difficult for them. I have brothers that are 5 and 6 years older than me. And they talked about the family leaving. And a lot of people were migrating out of the South in the 50s, and before that as well. But we had some relatives that left the year before we did and went to Albion, Michigan. And my brothers were really distraught about that because we lived out in the countryside and we were outside of the county seat, and your cousins were all you had to kind of learn life and experience things with, you know. And they left, went north. And so when they heard we were going north, they were really excited about it because they were going to get to see Bud and Zepp and all the guys that they played with on a regular basis. Well, when we got north, we never really saw them much. We saw them three times over the next 35 years. Because the North isn't like the South. It's not together. And people are scattered and doing all kinds of things. But the receiving that we got in Iowa, it was good. And I'm happy that our family ended up in Iowa. And that's largely in retrospect. Iowa, in a lot of ways, may seem like corn and all kind of stuff like that plain. But they were very progressive as well. And they voted on things way back in the 1800s on things like, we will treat black people fairly. We will, follow some protocols. We won't just, discriminate. They have rights. That was Iowa. And we were a large family, and being in a community that was not like Detroit, we had an opportunity to be seen as a family, an individual family. And so it was kind of, you get to know a person, and so you see how we are. We were good people, had good stock. My parents were good folk, and my brothers and sisters were too. And so we were seen as individuals, and not as much of a stereotype of what people expected we should be. We got a warning that the Klan was going to come. They'd come out one time already, but the critical time, the white gentleman that's over here among the elders in the carving, the elders in the top row, he came and warned the family that we had to get out. We had some time, but it wasn't a lot of time. And so what happened was Dad sold the cow next day to a man that was interested in buying the cow that we didn't actually own, but it was on our property. But sometimes you have to do hard things to get the right outcomes. And so he sold the cow for $60 and got a ticket that would take him to Moline, where we had family. Mom's sister and brother-in-law were there. So Mom and the four of us, we got put up with Grandma. We spent time with her while Dad got things secured in the North Brothers. The first time the night riders came by the house, my brother actually saw them. No one knew that but Clarence, my second oldest brother. He was sitting under, houses didn't have a basement, he was sitting under the steps when they came, and they were trying to entice Dad to go out and help them pick some catalpa worms. They grew on the catalpa tree, and they wanted him to come out, but he said, no, you guys get all the worms you need, go on. Clarence knew that something was wrong, but he didn't have any sense of what it was. He just knew it wasn't good. The men finally left, but it was also an indication to us we didn't have a lot of time to mess around. So they made arrangements for us to be, Mom and the rest of us, to be out with Grandma out further in the woods is what it amounted to. It's folk. I really like folk art, and the way that it presents. It's a warmth, and I think coming to Chicago from Iowa, it's a tough city, and people are different than Iowa, and so I really gravitated toward plain and folk. Grandma Moses is a great inspiration for me. Anne Marie Robertson is a great inspiration. They make art about common folk, in their daily lives, and the work tells a story. And I like the idea of telling a story with what we produce. It should mean something. So the next project that I'm going to work on, that I've started researching, is very painful. It has to do with the deaths of black and brown folks at the hands of law enforcement throughout the country. It is very unsettling, even in situations where it's a simple thing and somebody ends up dead. A woman from Chicago down in Texas, she gets stopped for a traffic light, now she's dead. A man in Ohio who was with his family and baby in the car, and he said, I have a FOID card, don't shoot me. The cop shoots him. What is that? And what I want to do is I want to create the scene. I want to create, and one that's painful for me that I keep thinking about is one where there's a drug bust. And they went into the house of this family and they're going through the rooms, and they get to one room, and somebody gets up in the bed, frightened because there's a lot of rustling. Bam! The cop shot her dead. She was an 11-year-old girl. These are the things I want to. Tough stuff.
Yes, it is.
The research is tough too, but it's important work. And the series I see is called 7 Seconds. The amount of time it takes to think and make a different decision. Let some kind of humanity come into play and trust to do something different. That's the focus of where I go from here. I will continue to do folk art like game boards and things and stuff like that I love because they're peaceful for me. But this one that's on my heart, and that came to me when the woman from Chicago got killed that was in a jail cell, hung herself. I don't believe that for a minute. Something very dark in the psyche of this country allows this to happen. I always think in terms of people sitting around a campfire maybe 10,000 years ago telling stories, and that's how we find out about each other and who we are and what we're like. Are you good or bad people? You know, by telling stories. My hope is that people will tell their stories. I think that you can't really hate on somebody so much when you get to know and see what's in their heart. We need to talk to each other. But I do know there's a responsibility. You know, if you have the ability to do some things, whether it's written or whatever it may be, if it helps, you should be putting it out there. Art has meaning. Sometimes it's just the meaning that it feels good when I make a game. But also when I tell a story, and that story is something that you want other people to understand and to tell their kids. The elders should be telling the stories that existed for the family. It may give you things to be proud of, you know, or it may make you humble over what happened, you know, in the past. The stories are important, and it shouldn't be lost in time. We are here for just a bit, but our lineage can go on, and the things that we do or tried to do, or the heart and the hurt that we had, it should be known. It should be known, and that's what I want for an aspect of my art to be. Is something. This is art that he made from his heart. This is art that tells his family's story. I said I would not shed a tear. James and Ruth, my people, their story, our story. Tell your story. Don't let your kids not know what the story is. There's beauty in that, strength in that. My dad always said, if you don't have a past worth mentioning, possible that you might not have a future worth defending. President of humanity